Hello and welcome back to my channel. I am Alison. I write as Alison May, 50% of Juliet Bell, and most recently as Ali Sinclair. And here on YouTube I talk about writing craft and all things publishing related. If that sounds of interest to you, please subscribe to the channel. Subscriber numbers are probably the biggest single thing that makes a difference to YouTube content creators. So please subscribe to the channel, like this video, comment on videos if there's something you're particularly interested in, or if you've got a question you would like me to answer here. And yeah, join in. For today, I am going to be talking about first drafts. Really what I'm going to be talking about is kind of draft zeros, and what to do if yours is just massively the wrong length. And the reason that I'm talking about this is that yesterday, so it is Thursday when I'm filming this, it will be Friday when it goes live on YouTube. So yesterday, Wednesday, I typed the end at the end of what probably would conventionally be called the first draft of my next book. I'm calling it draft zero because it's almost a sort of pre-first draft. It's so half-formed, you can't really even call it a coherent first draft. I'm calling it draft zero. And part of the reason that I'm calling it draft zero is that it is only 51,500 words. Now, if you don't know, a commercial length novel, commercial women's fiction, which is what I'm writing, would usually fall somewhere in the sort of 80 to 90,000 words, maybe sort of 75 to 100,000 words if we're taking a broader interpretation, but somewhere in the 80,000s, around 80,000 to 90,000 is your sweet spot. So I am currently 30k short, so more than 50% again on what I have written so far is what I kind of need to find. So fairly obviously this isn't really a complete draft, even though it begins, it has a prologue and an epilogue, has a sort of story arc in between, and it ends at the end. There aren't I haven't consciously skipped big chunks of story. I haven't stopped writing before I get to the resolution. There is a shape of a story there, but it is in no sense a coherent draft because it is 30,000 words too short to be that. Most writers will find, I think, that you tend to overwrite or underwrite in your first draft. Some writers I know write 140, 150,000 word first drafts and then have to lose 50k from that. I tend to be the other way. I tend to write short early drafts, and then every time I edit a book it generally gets longer. This is short even for me. I hit a point yesterday morning. So first yesterday morning I was at like 48,000 words, and I kind of did a little mental jump through what I needed to do to get to the end of the book and was like, yeah, I've only got about 3 more scenes to write here. This is going to be like 50, 55k if I'm lucky, and it came out as 51.5. Ooh, on the plus side I thought I could finish this today, which is always a nice feeling, but even for me that is short, and I was a little bit anxious when I got to the end of that and was like, 51,000 words, that ain't enough, this is a problem. What am I going to do? So that's what this video is about. What are you going to do in that scenario? And what I did yesterday afternoon was I sat down, and the question I asked myself was, what do I already know needs to be in this book that isn't there yet? So are there scenes that need to be there? Are there particular kind of episodes that I haven't really explored? Is there stuff that I've alluded to but it happens off page that needs to happen on the page? And I started off by making a list of that. And through making that list, what I identified is that actually I need a second point of view. And this is something I'd gone back and forth on while I was writing the draft. I wrote the first kind of 10-15k all in one point of view, hit a bit of a wall, jumped to another point of view to kind of break through that blockage. But as I was writing it, thought, yeah, I'm not really sure this is right. I suspect this is a one point of view book. Went back and wrote all of the rest just in one point of view. So I think there's like kind of 1 or 2 scenes fairly early on in a different point of view. And then I shied away from that. And what I realised as I was going through going, what doesn't happen on the page, is that actually that point of view that I'd sort of toyed in absolutely should be in the book, and it will absolutely enrich the story if I put it there. And I have scenes that are currently things that happen that are referred to or are talked about or are thought about that don't happen on the page that would be far more engaging if they did happen on the page and can happen on the page through this additional point of view. So having identified that, having identified scenes that happen in my kind of current point of view that aren't there or aren't explored enough, and scenes that would benefit the book to be there that come in this second point of view, just by listing out those, I'm pretty sure I've got at least 25k to add just there, and that's before I start my line edit and my polish and my adding in a bit more sense of time and place, which is always missing in my first drafts. So I'm conscious, but also confident that I have 30k to add. So at this point, I'm now way less worried than I was yesterday morning. I totally have enough story, I just have failed utterly to put a lot of it on the page. So that's why I'm kind of calling this draft 0. And for those of you who are planners, who plan your stories out before you write them, that idea will make very little sense, because your plan is effectively your draft 0. As I don't plan, this first draft that I've written, this 52,000 words, effectively is my draft 0. It effectively is my plan. So the fact that there's bits missing is in no way any more worrying than if I'd kind of written it all out in a spreadsheet, read it back and gone, oh, there's a scene missing there, there's a scene missing there. I can totally go and drop those in. And what I have at the end of that process will be a coherent first draft, which I can then polish and work up into the version, which will probably be version 3 or 4 that I actually send to my editor at the start of June. If, however, you're in this boat, you have a very, very short early draft and you go through it and think what should be on the page that isn't there at the moment, and you make that list and it isn't very much, or there isn't anything you can think of, then one of two things is probably true. Either what you have is a long novella. That's potentially fine if you can find a publisher who is interested in that, or if it's something that you are interested in self-publishing yourself, you might just have written a longish novella. Great. Or if you want to work it up into a full-length novel, what you might need to do is find a subplot, an additional story thread that you can work through this story to expand the world of the story out a little bit. Now, the phrase I'm absolutely avoiding using here is to pad it out, because what you definitely don't want is padding, and what you definitely don't want is a subplot that feels like you have bolted it on and it doesn't really relate to your main story. So if you're in that position and you think I need to create a subplot here, the first thing to do is, do I have any subplots that are kind of hinted at that aren't really there on the page? Because it might be that you've got the seeds of something that you can expand already that's sort of there organically, in which case, great. If not, if you need to create something at this point, then ask yourself, what is my main story really about? What are the themes I'm exploring in that main story? What is the conflict that I'm exploring in that main story? And then look at your secondary characters and think, what storyline can I put in relation to them? Or to look at your setting and go, what other story could happen in this world that explores the same sort of themes and conflict? So if your main story, for example, is about infertility and motherhood, maybe your main character is trying to get pregnant but struggling with not being able to get pregnant easily or quickly, or on the kind of time scale that she'd hoped for or anticipated, and maybe that's your main plot story, is about infertility and maternity. Look at then the world around her. So maybe you've given her a kind of best friend character who exists largely to support your main character, but maybe you could give her the best friend character that her own struggle. Maybe she gets pregnant during the story and doesn't know how to tell her friend who's struggling with infertility. Maybe she has like 6 children and that's your main character's dream and she's hugely envious, but your secondary character is, for whatever reason, really struggling with that, whether it's practically, financially, emotionally. Maybe she feels that she has kind of had to put her own dreams and her own identity aside to be a mother, and she's resenting that a little bit. So see if you can find a subplot that explores the same conflicts and themes as your main plot, but in a different light, because then what you'll end up is a whole that feels coherent and feels related and feels like it all hangs together, rather than a main story with an unrelated subplot kind of bolted onto it. One last piece of advice if you find yourself in this position where you're just way short on word count, you think you've got the bones of a novel there, but you are tens of thousands of words shorter than you need to be. And this is one of my most oft repeated pieces of writing advice, and I got this from Sue Moorcroft, fantastic writer and writing tutor in her own right, and that's to think about going deeper, not wider. So I've talked about adding on a subplot. That is about adding on some more plot, some more external events, but we're relating it to the themes and conflicts of our main story. When we talk about going deeper, not wider, we're talking about not adding on additional story elements, but going deeper into our main character's emotional conflict and making sure we've really explored that conflict for everything that it's worth, that you're not resolving that deep emotional conflict too cheaply, too quickly, too easily, and that you're playing out all of the different ways that conflict could express itself. So you might have that character who is struggling with infertility and with her desire to be a parent, and you might have lots of good exploration of how that affects her, maybe how that affects her relationship with her friends, maybe how that affects with her relationship with her partner. Have you thought about how that affects her at work? If she has colleagues who are going on maternity leave, how does she react to that? If she is getting career advancement that perhaps, because the world is not a fair place, women of her age who have taken breaks to have children aren't getting, how does she feel about that? Is she conflicted about it? Maybe the work arena is another arena in which you could play out that conflict and explore it in another way, going deeper into what your main character is experiencing rather than bolting on wider external plot events. So those are just some really quick thoughts about what to do if you are massively under length on your manuscript, inspired by the fact that I am massively under length on the draft I've just completed. And my other reason for sharing that is just to say really simply, if you are a developing author, if you are a newer author, and you find that you tend to write short, and there are people around you who are writing 140,000 word epics, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, I'm not a proper writer because the words don't just flow like that. I write like 50k or 60k and then I'm sort of done and I have to work to expand it. You are totally a proper writer. That is just how it goes for some of us. Some of us naturally underwrite, some of us naturally overwrite. Very few people naturally hit the sweet spot early doors. So don't stress about that. You're not aiming to be some sort of vision in your head of what a perfect writer looks like. You're looking to be the best version of you as a writer. And if underwriting and then expanding as you revise is part of your process, so be it. It's a perfectly good process. And here endeth the lesson. I will be back in 2 weeks' time when I will be talking about money in the publishing industry, and why the way that the publishing industry pays makes publishing more exclusionary for authors. So I'll be getting on my soapbox a little bit and talking about exclusion in publishing. So join me in 2 weeks for that. For now, farewell.